Warning: the following video contains mature content. Viewer discretion advised. Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. Making this video because I wanted to share my thoughts on Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams. This is my copy of it here, published by Avon Psychology, or rather Avon Press in their psychology department, which is an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers. And I just wanted to give an overall, I guess this is sort of like a book review, as it were, my thoughts on his book, his theory. This is essentially, if you aren't aware of, if you all, or whoever is watching this isn't aware of the magnitude of this book single-handedly set the course for modern psychology today. This is his masterpiece. This is the book that started him off on his own independent career. Prior to this, if you haven't seen my first video on Sigmund Freud, I've put the link in the description section of this video in the more info section down below, where I talk about his first published work, Studies in Hysteria, that he co-authored with Joseph Breuer. This, however, is his first solo book, and it is quite a volume. It to date, I believe, is the longest text Freud ever wrote. Everything else is, unless you count the combining of his lectures in one volume, but by the transcripts of these lectures. But really, essentially, this is single-handedly the one text that is the longest. My translation here, if we ignore the footnotes, is over 600 pages. And the format is dense. It took me a while to get through this book, but I appreciate the fact that I took the time to do so. Essentially, to understand modern psychology or psychoanalysis, and to understand the concept of dream psychology, one needs to start with this book. In my opinion, that is. Some people will go straight to Carl Jung, which of course you can, because Jung will reference Freud, he'll mention Freud. But I think it's really beneficial, if you're really interested in what dreams mean to us, to start with the founder of modern psychological dream studies. Now, Freud in his book, he goes through a huge part of this book talking about the history of dream analysis. He goes all the way, I kid you not, back to ancient civilization. He talks about the Greeks and the Egyptians and those civilizations and how they thought of dreams. And also talks about the Bible and how, of course, you have like Joseph, the prophet Joseph, discuss dreams being a huge part of his story. You have also in the Bible other characters that have dreams, and of course also in the Quran as well. The prophet Joseph is there as well, and also in many different theologies, many different religions, dreams have a heavy importance for the people who experience them. And after he talks about this, he then goes into the various opinions regarding what is the deal with dreams? Like, what are dreams exactly? And he talks about several different theories. Some people believed that dreams were produced because of a physical, a somatic experience. So he gives the classic example. Let's say you, eat something really salty before you go to sleep, and you're laying there and you're dreaming, and your throat is dry. So your body needs something. And so you have your unconscious produces a dream where you are maybe swimming in a river or you're gulping down water, and you actually wake up to discover that you are actually thirsty. And others, credited the source of dreams to the divine. In other words, it was God or the gods in the pagan sense processing and giving the dreams to mankind. He also talks about the infantile cases, that they are repressed memories from your childhood seeping back in. But Freud, having tested all these past theories, concluded that he actually thought his own innovative theory was the correct one. And his theory is actually very simple. His theory is that dreams are nothing more than wish fulfillments of the unconscious. And what he meant by wish fulfillment, it usually had to do with something that had to do with sex. Sexuality is a huge part of Freud's theory, and as we will see in future videos. And he essentially believed that the majority of dreams that we all dream have to do with repressed sexual memories that are bubbling up from our unconscious and then are projected as images in our dream work. And he goes through a host of typical dreams. I mean, the majority of the book is very much a discussion on dreams, the content of dreams, what they could mean, and he has a pretty great simplistic standard for what each symbol and what images in dreams and what they mean. So, for example, the classic thing is like a train going into a tunnel represents sexual intercourse. Two humongous mountains side by side, or two huge clouds representing breasts. He even believed that grass in dreams represents pubic hair. All these things, just constant sexual symbolism, were his main opinion regarding dreams. And I find personally, he has a lot of examples of dreams in his book to back up his claims. And I went into this book. I have to be honest from the very beginning that I do not consider myself a novice Freudian. If anything, I consider myself a novice Jungian, and we'll come more into the discussion of Jungian psychology in future videos when I start discussing Carl Jung. But I went into this without a bias. I mean, of course, that's utterly impossible to have a completely voided bias. But I went into this thinking, okay, maybe Freud will prove to me that Freudian psychology is the way to go, and that his views on dreams are indeed the correct view. And I have to say that not only, in my opinion, is his theory utterly simplistic, that dreams are nothing more than wish fulfillments of various kinds. I mean, the main thing is the sexuality, but I mean wish fulfillments in general, but also the fact that his analysis of dreams, the examples he gives, seem very forced. In other words, he'll tell you a dream, he'll record a dream, and he'll give you his analysis. And to me, they're very, very forced upon. It's like, someone tells them that they had a dream about, I was walking with my friend, and, and we saw a big building or something. And he doesn't literally say this, but I'm giving you an example. And then in his analysis, like, oh, well, this must be an urge for homosexuality because you're with your friends, and you're with your male friend, and you see a gigantic building, which must represent the male genitalia erect, and things like this. I mean, it's just like, what? I mean, I'm with my friend in my dream, I see a big building, we go into it. I mean, it's just, to me, the whole time I was reading his examples, I kept wanting to believe what he was saying, and then caught myself just thinking, this is just nonsense. I mean, how can it be that we have so many dreams that we cannot explain, or dreams that are so profound, their imagery is just so immense, that literally he boils it down to simple sexual wish fulfillments, or wish fulfillments in general, usually derived from the sex drive, or the libido, as he calls it. And to me, that was many times I'm reading just going, I can't believe this, And I also was thinking, I can now understand why Carl Jung himself ended up rejecting Freud's essential theory on the subject. But the last part of the book sets the stage for Freud's his general contribution. I mean, this book is a contribution to psychology. I'm not, just because I disagree with it, I'm not saying that I don't recognize that this is one of the cornerstone to the foundations of modern psychology. And to his credit, he was afraid to talk about things that during his day were unheard of. To actually discuss with patients topics of sexuality, sexual orientation, or sex practices, and we'll get into more detail about that as I get into his other works on his psychology of love and whatnot. But I mean, this is groundbreaking. This was unheard of prior to him writing this book. But the major thing is he ends the book talking about his scheme of the conscious, of the psyche, of the mind. And he basically has, at this very early stage, this predates his naming of the mind and the personality. This predates his usage of the terms such as ego, superego, and id. This comes later. At this point, he refers to the the mind as simply consciousness, pre-consciousness, and unconsciousness. And he believes that the majority of dreams is a combination of the following. That the majority of dreams have something to do with an event that happened during the previous day. So you go through your whole day and then you dream. And whatever you dream has some connection to what you dreamt or what you actually physically went through that very day, the day before. But it can also include content that sets off unconscious repressed material from the id, or from the unconscious, that bubbles up and is experienced while you are dreaming. And the majority of this have to do with repressed memories. So in other words, what ends up happening is you experience something throughout your day, and that memory, though you don't know it at the time, is stored in your preconscious. And when you sleep, those concepts, those memories, those images are stored in the preconscious, and they then, if they do actually, set off things from your unconscious, which bubble up and form images which are your dreams. The reason why dreams need to be decoded is because even though we are asleep, our preconscious still acts as a guardian, so that the terrible images that are repressed, or the terrible images that we have forgotten through infantile amnesia, that bubble up from the unconscious, that even though they are allowed to bubble up, they are coded with images and symbols, which are the images we see when we dream. Now, if you actually experience a dream like a nightmare, where it's very, very obvious, like let's say you were attacked by someone in your past, and you have a recurring dream where you are attacked, that is the unfortunate failure of the defense mechanisms in sparing you from that blatant image. But the majority of images that we experience when we dream are coded with by the defense mechanisms while we sleep, so that they are not too much of an assault on our unconscious, or on our mind, on our personality. So Freud was of the opinion that the actual images are just facades, they're masks, that our unconscious is masquerading what it's trying to, what bubbles up, so that it doesn't offend us too much. And that's why you need to go to therapy, so that, or at least a Freudian psychoanalyst, so that he or she can tell you exactly what they mean. Now, of course, Jung disagreed with this approach completely with regards to the latent content of a dream and the actual content of the dream, that what we see and what they mean. He believed both equally are valid and are important. Freud, of course, believed that it is simply what is beyond the images. What are the images actually connotating? Now, you can see, if you haven't already concluded this yourself by me speaking, that this can leave the therapist or the psychoanalyst to basically conjure up whatever he feels like. Because if the images that you actually experience have really they're not valid. I mean, they are in the sense they may be cluing us into something deeper, but it's essentially the content that is the deeper content that is the most important. Then the therapist could simply tell you, well, that image must mean this. So, for example, if I tell my therapist, or, hypothetically speaking, if I'm seeing a Freudian analyst, that I had a dream where I'm in a train going through a tunnel, well, I may actually think that the train is important. Like, why am I on a train? Why the train specifically? But a Freudian analyst doesn't actually believe that the train itself, the image of the train, is relevant. What's relevant is what it's masquerading as. And the Freudian psychoanalyst would tell me I was dreaming about it was a coded memory, or a coded image that was coding the concept of sexual intercourse. And so it's very easy for a Freudian psychoanalyst to just tell you whatever he or she thinks it is. Now, of course, they will keep this in the context of, they'll ask you questions about your previous day, they'll ask you what's going on in your life to try and determine what best fits, but this really, you should see eventually, this gives free rein for the Freudian psychoanalyst to conclude whatever he or she thinks it is. And so this is, again, one of the major contributions, but this is also one of the major issues I take with this book in particular, and why I do feel that the Jungian view of dreams is much more substantial. But that is it in a nutshell. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I'm sure professors have lectured on this book. Whole semesters done on this book. But I feel like that's it in a nutshell. So please feel free to leave your comments I would appreciate seeing some discussion with regards to this book. If anybody actually is a Freudian analyst out there and would like to defend Freud's theory, I would love to see that. If anybody just wants to criticize, feel free to criticize, and or share your thoughts on the subject. Thank you all for watching, and have a good day.